Big Talk is the show on Next Radio 106.1 FM. This is the Big Talk. My name is Kana Mgume, and we're going to be looking at a number of issues today. But first, let me introduce my panel. Of course, as we get into the first topic, we'll be discussing taxes under the Traffic and Road Safety Amendment Bill 2021. Finance Ministry is proposing an annual fee on motor vehicles of 200,000 shillings and 50,000 shillings for motorcycles. The ministry is also suggesting a 40,000 shillings fine every day. Each car that has not paid this tax and it will be on the road without paying this fee, they will have to go on and pay this fine. Now, according to the Ministry of Finance, this is intended to streamline the transport sector. But there are also other taxes. Let's talk about scrapping off of OTT and replacing it with a 12% charge on all internet bundles. Let's talk about the tax that is going to be levied on alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks. Let's talk about the tax on fish. That will form a conversation this morning, and then later on we'll bring in a sneak peek of what is happening in Chankwanzi, where the MPs-elect of the NRM party are there for a retreat. And of course, later on, we'll also bring in issues of curfew as we end the show. But first, let me introduce my panel. We have the Minister of State for Information, Communication and Technology, Honorable Peter Ogwang. Good to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, Kanare. I'm happy I'm here. It's long when I was last year.
Yeah.
But I also want to thank the management of NBS. Specifically, I want to commend my brother, Philip Kalisa, for this big investment. I thank you so much.
Okay, and also in studios, we have the Executive Director for Center for Constitutional Governance, Sarah Bidete. Good to have you on the show. And also we are joined by Grace Namugambe, the Program Officer, Financing for Development at SEATINI Uganda. SEATINI is Southern and Eastern African Trade, Information and Negotiations Institute, SEATINI. Good to have you on the show, Grace.
Thank you, Canary, and good morning to all listeners.
She's also an expert on taxes. Let's begin the show. Let's begin by looking at this Traffic and Road Safety Amendment Bill 2021. Grace, when you looked at this proposal from government, what was the first thing that came into your mind?
I think for us, one is to, yes, we recognize that government actually needs to raise revenue, given the COVID pandemic and the need for it to continuously fill the gap in terms of revenue, but also reducing its reliance on debt. However, for us, it's one to recognize that much as government is seeking to raise revenue, it needs to put into consideration other factors within the economy. And for us, is that we need to look at tax as a tool for development. And when you look at it as a tool for development, you don't look at it solely for purposes of raising revenue, because there are issues to do with equity, where we see revenue as a tool that can actually reduce the inequality gap between the rich and the poor, but also looking at issues around redistribution in terms of how the revenue is going to be redistributed, and of course issues to do with representation, that the taxes being put in place are actually responsive to the needs of the citizens, or are actually putting into consideration the current status of the citizens. So for us, when we look at the new tax measures, and specifically now getting into the Road and Safety Act, the annual fees that government is seeking to reintroduce, we think it is not fair, because this is a tax that was done away with, I think, in 2007, and we saw government introducing an excise duty on fuel. And having done that already, this is probably getting into double taxation. But also looking at it in terms of administration, because one of the reasons why it was scrapped in the first place back then was because it was hard to administer. And
because it's a direct tax.
Yes. So we feel it's not a fair tax, and it's definitely bound to increase costs of production for manufacturers, but also increasing the cost of living, because we see people increasingly relying on private transport vis-a-vis public transport, given the challenges with our transport system. But we also largely see the cost of production going up. So these are not taxes that we think should be adopted by Parliament.
Honorable Peter Gwang, government should be moving away from direct taxes. Government is increasingly moving towards direct taxes. What is government's agenda?
First of all, Canada, maybe I want to thank my sisters who are here. But the question of tax, it goes back even to me with a Christian. It is one thing which dates back up to the ancient times of the Bible. If you look at Matthew chapter 22, I think up to verse 12 to 22, it really begins to state on the issue which raises on how taxes were collected then. Furthermore, I also want first to put this on record. The tax process is a consultative process. In this view, the Minister of Finance normally go through all stakeholders, they consult them on every tax measure which they intend to propose to the country. Furthermore, it lays these bills in Parliament. And I'm very, very happy that I have my two sisters here. The Committee of Finance in the Parliament has a role to invite all stakeholders, any person in the public who has a dissenting view, who has a view which he or she feels needs to put before the committee and to government, that person can go and appear before the committee. It is true, like my sister said, as a government, we have a role to collect taxes. As a government, we have a role to implement our pledges. That's our manifesto. As a government, we have a role to fulfill and to help the country in terms of delivery of services. Now, it is true, like my sister also has raised, there's been a complaint we have overborrowed and we are borrowing. So what leaves that? What do we have as a government? We have to look at how do we generate.
I think the problem is not that you've levied taxes, but the problem is that, as she said, Grace said, this tax was taken away, I think, in 2007, and then put on fuel. Now, Ugandans are paying tax on fuel, and government is now proposing that we go back to paying tax now on both fuel and then also if you own a motor vehicle.
I'm coming to address myself to that question. Now, we as government, we are trying to look at which are the sources which we can be able to raise revenue. It is true we already have a tax on fuel. It is true we are looking at the areas of cars. For instance, I want to give an example. Ogwang speaking here might have 6 cars in his parking. Are we clear? That's Ogwang. Those cars. Why don't we look at an avenue of seeing how Ogwang can be taxed to generate money to help that Ugandan who does not have a tax, who does not own a car? Because we look at these areas in terms of how do we get revenue to support the country in terms of giving services to the people. So these are the areas which most times government looks at. However, like I said, this process are consultative process. And as I speak now, the bill which we are talking about is before a committee of parliament. It's incumbent upon parliament to say, do we consider the proposal government has brought or not? What are the merits? What are the demerits of this? For me, I'm only giving a case in point that as government, we have made the proposals. But there's a second arm of government which has a mandate to invite anyone with the views. For instance, now, it is true, we must acknowledge this corona, this pandemic has affected the economy. We are operating the collections in URA. Hello. So we are trying to say which are the areas which are taxable, which can help us raise taxes to support the economy and also support the country in terms of tax delivery. So for me, I want to ask and call upon the people. The question of tax collection is one which is not popular. I don't remember any tax which has been popular among the population, not only in Uganda but world over. Number 2, the question of service delivery. It is important that once we collect taxes, we must give services to the people because that's the role of government. But I also want to call upon Ugandans. If we don't want to support government tax measures, if we don't want to look at how do we give you services, at what point do we then serve the people of Uganda? This is entirely why I'm here to say we entirely need to support government in moving tax proposals. But also I want to say we are not static. There are many proposals which have been brought. For instance, there was a cry on OTT. It's out. It is true. There are new measures which have come in terms of within my sector, coming up with taxes. I have my own view, which I want to say here. First of all, Minister of Finance did consult the ministry. But when they consulted the Minister of ICT, we gave them proposals. In terms of the percentage specifically.
Is this your proposal of the 12% charge on internet?
No, the question of determining the percentage is one where I also have contestation. They came to us, we made proposals, but when finance went back, they did not ask us how much should we charge, how much should we levy.
So what was your proposal?
That is why I'm also saying, as a ministry, I also have a view which I would be able to say, please, this is it. But the main proposal, the reason why we made this, first of all, there's already a discrepancy in the IT sector. When you're buying airtime, you're taxed. But those on data are not. So for us, we said, can this be aligned? Unfortunately, when we made that, can they be aligned? There was a challenge. Finance says, okay, can we go and put a 12% tax on?
No, what I want to understand, what was your proposal in terms of aligning these?
For us, our proposal was, can we have a uniformity in terms of taxes as far as...
How would that work?
How would that work? For instance, you buy, if you go and buy airtime, you're paying a tax.
Yes, I am.
But that one who is on data, who goes to get data direct, has no tax. So for us, we are saying...
So your proposal is exactly this.
No.
The only contestation you have is the 12%.
Exactly.
For you, what was your percentage?
That preserve is with Minister of Finance. And that's why I'm saying, that's why I also have a complaint. As a ministry, our view would have been, why don't you give at 0.2%? Why don't you give at 0.5?
But you realize...
why 12?
It's not even about the figure. It's even about the tax itself. Can't you see that you're going to kill innovation?
Let me be honest with you. We are not killing innovations. Like I said, really, we need also to support government in terms of something. We have a role to play.
We've supported government. We're still supporting government in so many ways. But can't you see that you're killing innovation?
First of all,
this is a very big risk that you're going to take.
The health sector and education is not meant to undergo that tax. That one I want to put it clear. In terms of health and education, no.
But
so we're talking about killing innovation. It is education institutions, which is entirely on research. It is the health sector, which is entirely meant to help us.
But you know, when I buy data,
yes.
When I buy data, no one is going to know whether I'm going to use it for information on health or on education. When I buy data like this, it's already taxed.
As before, it has not been. But today, going forward, if that law is passed 1st of July, it will.
Sarah, let me bring you in here. We'll handle the scrapping of OTT and replacing it with a 12% charge in just a bit. But first, let's pick your comments on the Traffic and Road Safety Amendment Bill 2021 that proposes an annual fee on people like you who own motor vehicles, 200,000 shillings annually. It's not a one-off. Annually, and if you own a border, you have to pay 50,000. And for every day that you've not paid this tax, you pay a fine of 40,000.
Yeah, I cannot. Before I get into that specific question, allow me to comment briefly on the context. The Honourable Minister did state clearly that the economy is shrinking. So when you have revenue collection shrinking, it means the citizens' incomes are shrinking and they have no capacity to pay taxes. So you have this context with the citizens hit. You know, citizens are hard hit by COVID pandemic, and that's why you have shrinking revenues. So who are you seeking to tax in this shrinking context? When citizens are hard hit and they are the ones that you are seeking to overtax in a shrinking economy. Does the context and timing make sense? And my view is that it doesn't. Yes, it's important for government to collect revenue, but the timing and the welfare of the citizens is the first issue to take into consideration. We all know how COVID pandemic has affected businesses. Shopping arcades are closing, businesses are closing. I'm in the NGO sector, offices have closed. We all know the reality of the shrinking economy. When you have businesses shrinking, it means you have no cash flow among the people. So there is no revenue to tax. And we have all lived this reality. We know what COVID has done to all of us. So this is the timing. And of course, I need to include in the curfew and how it's destroying and distorting the shrinking economy. And the government's hesitant on, failure to lift the curfew. When COVID centers have closed, Mulago COVID Center has closed. There are few patients in Entebbe. I mean, what's the relevance of the curfew that is affecting the economy and reducing the productive time of citizens? And this is the same government that is saying this is the context in which they need to overtax a hard-hit citizen. And I think they have completely got it wrong. Whereas it is true that government needs to mobilize domestic revenue and make household incomes grow, but they need to focus on fiscal discipline. Let's look at where the money is going. You have a huge cabinet, Nambore Stadium cabinet. You have a parliament that has no seating capacity. And every day government is creating new districts, creating new constituencies. We have a bloated administrative bill. And it takes away the big chunk of money that should have gone into service delivery. What are they doing about that? We have a lot of wastage. Treatments abroad have resumed. All these people never go to our hospitals. It was only COVID that forced them to look into our hospitals. No, Honorable, you have your time to talk. No, you will have your time to talk, Minister. I think
that we use the correct words here, because where I come from, where I work, decorum is very important. So
no, I'm talking about wastage, Canary.
We have these people here. Yes, I am.
Okay, Honorable Minister. Okay,
I think let's first listen to his concern.
You can call me. You have Ogang Peter here. These people. So let's use decorum. Let's use the language which is a bit, because we have listeners, we have viewers who respect us with the esteem, and whom I also know they respect you.
Thank you very much, Honorable. So we have a government that does not take the context into consideration. You have, things like treatments abroad, workshops. All, during the time when Parliament was debating on how to save money for the COVID pandemic, there was a minority report which clearly stated the wastage in government that could be saved to revamp the health sector. And that was not done. And also, the recent Auditor General's report did highlight our debt burden, I think, which is at 48.2% of the GDP. And you have, I think our domestic revenue budget is 28 trillion, and the government is only able to collect 22 trillion. So they plan with a deficit of 6 trillion for domestic revenue collection. So you have this context and high fiscal indiscipline by government. Yes, we need to close the debt gap. We need to raise more revenue, but can we first do away with wastage? I think that's where government should focus their energies. But coming back to your question on the double taxation on road, traffic and the traffic amendments, I agree with my sister here that when road license was outlawed in 2007, it was clear that that money was added on fuel. And as you consume fuel, you are paying road tax. So as government, in their regressive manner, proposes to go back to direct taxes as compared to indirect taxes, where there is high efficiency in terms of collection and very big gaps when it comes to direct taxation. So as they regress in that manner, are they looking at the tax they added on fuel? Can they first remove it if they want to regress and go back to road license? I think that's the first point that we should.
Interesting. So, but yes, Honorable, you
First
have...
of all, I want to thank my sister so much. And like I did say at the beginning, maybe I need to make this first correction. That I want to quote that I was talking about Matthew 22, 12, 15 to 22. My brother and my sisters were here. I want to say this. My sister has made a passionate appeal on views which she feels are not right But as far as the subject matter is concerned, I really want to appeal to her as a member of parliament that she can go and make very good submissions before a committee of parliament.
You know,
why I'm saying this,
you know, Honorable, sorry to cut you short. Sorry to cut you short, Honorable, but you know, people made submissions during the OTT debate, and people thought that their submissions were taken in, but they ended up in a minority report, and then later on OTT was introduced. Very, very unpopular tax, which I don't think you also agree with.
No, what I want to put this on record is sometimes it is good to always ask to come here and make these very good presentations, which are good for the public to listen to us and to view us. But it's also good that you go on record as a concerned citizen. And specifically, she represents a non-government organization, and we allow them to operate. So they are an alternative. They should be able to make alternative policies, which in my view, I want to thank you for the information you're giving. However, where we lose the point is one. I want to agree with you entirely that we have a right to collect taxes on behalf of the citizens of Uganda. I want to agree with you entirely that our debt burden is increasing. Now the question which leaves me and you, which we must answer, what should we do? When you talk about a shrinking economy, it is true all over. This pandemic has affected economies. We are not an exception for that purpose. You want to tell me here, all over these countries are not coming up with tax proposals to support the economies? Should we continue borrowing? In my opinion, no. And that's why we are saying there are areas we have made proposals. Number one, there are areas where we have said, go and make your views clear. If you feel this view can be accepted by Parliament, please, Parliament will reject it as executive. We respect. Like, for instance, you've said it is double taxation. We're taxing fuel, we're taxing cars. In our opinion, we're saying, I gave a very easy example, that there are some people, which, in my opinion, if I have 6, I might be fueling 1. Others are parked in my compound. If that
so why should they pay road license if they are parked?
Listen, I'm talking about vehicle tax.
Yes.
So if that helps me, what's wrong with that person paying a license for purpose of developing the country? The other one is, when you talk about the question of the timing, we work according to the time of the budget. So at what point should this be brought up forward? We all know it is a budget cycle.
Yeah, it's a budget cycle, but the timing
we all know that there's a pandemic.
The timing that Sarah is talking about is...
ask another question. Canada, who knows when this pandemic will go away? Because we are saying it's bad timing. Who knows when it will go away? We are saying Mulago is now empty. Are you aware that in the neighborhood, some hospitals are full? Are you aware that we are beginning to get the second variant within this country? So let's not just be short-sighted. We must look at the future. Let's look at tomorrow. So when we talk about a huge cabinet, a huge parliament, please, I want to say this. First of all, if you think dictatorship is democracy is cheap, then to a big extent, we might have to think about trying dictatorship, which in my opinion is not correct. Truth be told, as a country, these are the questions which we must discuss. Do we need a cabinet of 81 ministers? In your opinion, you might say no, but in the opinion of the appointing authority, he says yes. That is a question for another day, in my opinion, here. If you think it is, for instance, that we're talking about wastage, are you aware that as government we have come up, I want to put this on clear because I'm a member of cabinet and a minister of information. We have carried out rationalization. We are going to save 989 billion shillings annually in terms of abolishing some of the agencies which have been created. Annually, that's almost $1 trillion shilling. In the next 2 years, that money is going to go back to the budget to support revenue, to support us in terms of development of our country.
The only question here is whether that money will be put to proper use.
That is now what I want to say this. We must also acknowledge Canada. That sometimes Ugandans, I laugh. When we talk about to put to proper use, we have a budget, we have a legislator, we have the Auditor General. That's why I'm happy when these questions are being raised. Because if they were being kept under the carpet, there would be an issue there. But I'm happy the Auditor General carries out audit, right from the first office to the last office. The question is, we might be able to say, Treasury bill is always brought to Parliament. When it is brought to Parliament, it's meant to be acted upon. The question is executive, Parliament, judiciary. So the wastages we're talking about, all the corruption we're talking about, the other arms of government which must take course. But at the end of the day, for you to say, we are not performing, we are not performing. So Canada, I want to put this on record and say that treatment abroad. Oh my God. First of all, you see, sometimes it is really, it puts me in a situation where I want to answer certain things, but others I don't want to answer. Oh, one can afford to fly abroad to treat himself.
But there's a budget item.
Listen, I'm coming to that. But I'm also a public officer. Like, I'm a member of parliament. That's the office of a member of parliament. I'm entitled to insurance. The insurance which government pays me by that I want to give you. You know how much money I'm paid? Canada is 6 million. Then it is upon the parliamentary commission to agree with the insurance companies. If I fell sick today and the National Medical Board feels it deemed that I should be recommended to fly out, it is the insurance company which pays me. It's not it's not that you go out on your own, but also I can fly out on my own without even going through the National Medical Insurance Board to go and get medical treatment outside. Why should it be an issue?
It's an issue because there is a budget item.
That is why I'm telling you that
there is a budget item, it's taxpayers' money, and the taxpayer is saying, why don't you develop our hospitals here so that there is no need to seek treatment abroad?
But I've told you, before I go to abroad, I have to go through a National Medical Board, which is chaired by consultants from government, doctors. It's not that I fly out today and I go out. So number two, I want to answer you. I want to answer you this question clearly. Madam, if you don't know, government could clear some people, fly out of the country.
Let's bring back the debate on taxes. Let me get back to Grace. What would be the implication of these tax measures? What do you see as an implication if by July these taxes actually the bill is amended and the tax is on? What would be the implication?
I think before I answer that question, I'd like to respond to a comment that the Honorable raised about us presenting or interacting with the committee and Ministry of Finance on some of these tax issues. Is that yes, we have been there, we've interacted with them, and we've presented to them some of our concerns on the tax bills. However, I'd like to be a bit practical, also in terms of having structured spaces where citizens are actually effectively engaging. Because there is engaging where it's just ticking the box because the law provides for it. But if you tell me that, because we very well know that the tax bills were, I think, presented on 1st April, and we went into an Easter holiday. And right after the Easter holiday, on I think it was it was Thursday and Friday when Parliament was actually listening or having people come in to present their views. Now, those are just 2 days. The process was not really made public to invite people to share their concerns. It's because we are keenly following up on what is going on in Parliament that we are able to know. But for the ordinary citizen out there who might actually be impacted by some of these taxes, they are not aware and they cannot go on to engage in such a space. Now, about some of the taxes that you're saying are actually fair, that is the point that I had raised at the start, that taxation should not just be about government raising revenue.
That's true.
It should be about government ensuring that there is development even with the taxes being collected. So in the midst of this pandemic, if government is coming up with taxes that are impacting a rather smaller group of citizens, then it is not fair. We have a very large informal sector. We have government awarding numerous tax incentives and exemptions that go on and on and on, and it is mainly foreign investors that are benefiting from these incentives and exemptions. Some of them are given out discretionarily without other people knowing. And these companies are actually coming here, getting these exemptions, investing and shifting all their profit back to their countries without people benefiting. And even if they say that the citizens are going to benefit if they give the exemptions and we have all these investments, we have, they are going to supposedly employ people and give them very little amounts of money, which even if you impose payee might attract a payee, of about 5,000, or which is a very small margin, right? So I think there are very many other alternative sources of revenue beyond coming and imposing taxes that are going to impact a very small group of people. Looking at taxes on internet, we see that as a country, even given the COVID-19 pandemic, we are increasingly relying on digital spaces. We're increasingly relying on internet to trade, to have education. Health services are also shifting and getting onto internet services. But also looking at it in terms of when they say education and health services, how are they going to
how
are
is
they
it going
going
to be
to
determined?
administer that? And I think from one of the latest interactions we've had with officials from government around that specific taxes, that they're targeting education institutions. Say, if I want to access internet that has not been that is not going to have this excise duty, I must go and sit at Makerere University and access that internet, because for it is not going to be subject to that, to the excise duty.
So I'm trying to dodge 12%, but I'm paying 2,000 shillings for transport to go to Makerere.
At Makerere. But we have very many people who are having online education. Government itself is trying to encourage virtual e-learning. How is it going to do that when a student, say in Kaberamaido or Kotido, much as they're at Makerere University or UCU or wherever, has to learn, but they also have to incur that tax. So it is not fair. But also looking at it, going back to the issues to do with the digital economy, is that
I am very, very happy with the issues my sister.
Is that we have.
You know why I'm very happy? That's what I need.
So, but you have consultants, experts in government. Some people really wonder when government comes up with such proposals that what exactly is at the back of their minds, because these are top consultants on tax. They are top officials that have dealt with tax for a very long time. For them, they don't see what these other people are seeing.
First of all,
before that, Honorable, can I finish? Before that, we see the opportunity of the digital economy. Yeah, a lot of trade is going on there, and we have so many companies there that are actually not paying their taxes, despite the fact that they are generating revenue or sourcing revenue from Uganda, right? So I think those are avenues that government needs to tap into. However, if you impose a tax, the tax on the internet, it also means that you're going to discourage people from getting online, from engaging in some of that trade online. Yeah, and if you're discouraging people, then even these digital companies are also not going to operate in the country, right? So at any one point, if you come up and say, we are going to block you, you're not going to, operate in Uganda, they don't mind because they've not had very many clients. However, if you let them grow and have, it's usually referred to as onboarding, having very many people accessing those platforms, then the moment you say that we are going to block you unless you pay or are coming in to pay your taxes, then they will be concerned. So I think it's also about government balancing between trying to raise revenue and trying to ensure that it creates an environment that is going to boost revenue collection. And I think without me getting into the implication, because the implication varies according to the different measures, is that
let's begin with implications of this specific tax on motor vehicles, but all that after this short commercial break. Let's sip some water for 2 minutes and we'll be back. This is The Big Talk. Good morning.